Yes, we're going to make a start. It's 12:32. Welcome, everyone, to this event. It's lovely to have you all here today. I'm your chair today, and my name's Sharon Inkotaria. A little bit about me: I'm a non-executive director at Harmerton Healthcare, where I chair the People and Culture Committee, and I'm also the wellbeing champion there. And I'm also the vice chair of the CECOL Group, which is a Oh, I'm hearing that there's problems with my sound. Is that right?
I can hear you, Sharon.
Okay. I think Ife has a problem with my audio. Sorry, Ife. As I was saying, I'm the vice chair of the CECO Group, which is a national network for non-executive directors and chairs from Black, Asian, and minorities backgrounds. So that's a little bit about me. Just got some housekeeping stuff to go through. Today's all about tackling inequalities to build a healthy workforce. The session is being recorded, just in case that you didn't realize that it will be recorded. And feel free to populate the chat function, introduce yourself, say where you're from, so that you can get to know colleagues on the call. If this is your first time to an NHS provider's webinar, welcome. These webinars are part of their Race Equality 2.0 program. And just to remind ourselves about NHS providers, it's a membership organisation for trusts and foundation trusts, helping them to deliver high quality, patient-focused care by enabling them to learn from each other, acting as the public voice and helping shape the system in which they operate. This race equality program is part of a suite of programs which has been excellent. I've been to a few of them and they have been absolutely fantastic. It's been developed based on the views and leaders and insights from leaders in trusts who are both white and from ethnic minority backgrounds. And from the insights gleaned from leaders, there are three areas of meaningful change on race equality. And these are hearts and mind change, giving leaders the confidence and capability to act through evidence of what works, and asking leaders to take accountability for embedding race equality at the heart of board's business. So really rich mission and agenda there. So back to today. Well, let's see what's on the agenda for today. Next slide, please. And as you can see from the information you would have received, we've got a power-packed session today. We have some phenomenal speakers sharing about fantastic practice that they've been involved in. And the webinar builds on high impact action 4 of the NHS England's Equality, Diversity and Improvement Plan to develop and implement an improvement plan to address health inequalities within the workforce. And I came across this fantastic quote by Martin Luther King, if I may share. And he said, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhumane. So the fact that we're seeing this as a priority is paramount. It's really, really important. 1.4 million people employed in the NHS, and this creates an opportunity to positively impact the population by addressing health inequalities in the workforce. So this webinar will focus on supporting leaders to understand this particular action 4, sharing both internal and external facing initiatives which can support a reduction in health inequalities. So I'm hoping that's a useful backdrop to what we can expect today. I'm going to run through the speakers and then they will introduce themselves as when it's their turn. But we've got Dr. Ife Okocha, Chief Executive of Oxleas NHS Foundation Trust, Rachel Clare Evans, who's the Director of Strategy and People at Oxleas NHS Foundation Trust, Laura Smith, Director of Workforce, Organisation Development and System Development at Leeds Community Healthcare NHS Trust and the Leeds GP Confederation, Cavita Chapman, Managing Director of Inclusive Leadership and Talent, and Tom Warner, Clinical Workforce Equalities Manager, NHS England, Midlands. So a full suite of great speakers there. So I hope you've got your notes, ready to take your notes and, get those questions ready for the speakers as well. In terms of some housekeeping, I mentioned before it's being recorded. Try and keep your cameras on wherever possible, but keep your mics off during the presentation to minimize background noise. If you lose connection, which can happen, just reuse the joining instructions or take a photo of the screen so you've got that email there, race.equality@nhsproviders.org. At the end of each segment, we will have a chance for a couple of questions. And then at the end of all presentations, we'll have a bit more of a Q&A. So you will have a chance to ask some questions there as well. Any unanswered questions will be taken away and answered after the event. And at some point after today, after this event, you will receive a link to an evaluation form. Please, please, please complete it because I know the team will really appreciate your feedback. So a lot there to take in. I'm going to be quiet because I think we're ready for our next speaker. And that is Dr. Ife Okocha, Chief Executive of NHS Oxleas, as I said. And he's joined by Rachel Clare Evans, the Director of Strategy and People. And they're going to share about building a fairer Oxleas. Colleagues, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Ife Okocha is my name, Chief Executive of Oxleas, and my colleague, Rachel Clare Evans. Rachel, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Really nice to meet you. I'm Director of Strategy and People at Oxleas and really pleased to talk to you about something which is a huge priority for us, building a fairer Oxleas. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And this is going to be a joint presentation. I'll go through a few slides and then hand over to Rachel to tell you more. As the chair has said, I'm sure we'll give you time for some questions, and of course we'll be part of the panel at the end to answer any questions and for further discussions. Next slide, please. So I suppose the question is, why did we decide to do this? A couple of things to say. The first is that we have three main things on our strategy. Sometimes I say two, other times I say three. The two things are really that we want Oxleas to be a great place to work. And the second is that it also becomes a great place to offer services, paying attention to two things: zero delays, as well as great out-of-hospital care. But events following the first wave of the pandemic, as well as other things that pretty much affected the West. So with the first wave of pandemic, we know that the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups were adversely affected by the pandemic, and people rightly began to ask questions. And then the second thing that happened, of course, was that we had the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter movement. And those issues really led us to think about how we could support our staff. The then Chief Exec wrote out to all staff, and you can see a copy of the letter on the right of your screen. Next slide. And we decided, on account of the strength of feeling, to engage in listening exercise. So we held these over 3 months, inviting heads of professions, board members, particularly members of the executive and some non-executive directors, to be part of those listening events. And after 3 months, we decided to distill what people were telling us. There were two things in particular. One was fairer progression. The other, which you'll see shortly on the next slide, was about race and culture. And here are some of the comments that people made with respect to fairer progression. I don't think I necessarily want to go over them, but you've had some time to read them. And the second top thing, next slide, please, was that people wanted us to speak more about race and culture. And this was an interesting one, because on the face of it, there were a number of managers who were very uncomfortable, didn't know what to say, didn't want to say the wrong thing. But there were also a lot of staff who felt that it's not their responsibility to introduce the subject, and certainly wanted us to talk more about this at Oxleas. Next slide. until we set up the Building a Fairer Oxleas steering group, which I chaired from the outset, along with membership from a number of board members, senior leaders, and other volunteers across the organization. And what you see on the screen are the 6 things that people voted for. So we required every participant to vote in terms of the priorities. As you can imagine, when you do something like this over 3 months, we have 1,500 staff. We can imagine that there will be loads and loads of things that we wanted to agree where to begin, and these were the top priorities. Next slide. I'll hand over to Rachel to then talk to you about where we got to so far.
Thanks, Iffy. So I think what was hugely powerful was for all of our organisation to hear that the challenges that people faced, they weren't limited to one particular setting, one particular profession, one bit of the organisation. There were problems right across the breadth that we needed to tackle. And by distilling those into some key themes and some key stories, I think it really provided the platform that made us realise that this was something we were really committed to tackling, and we committed that we weren't going to launch it with a bang and then let it fizzle. It was going to be something that was going to get bigger and bigger every single year, and that's exactly what we've done. So what I would say is that we then really threw ourselves into trying to tackle a few things and tackle them well. We didn't want to try and boil the ocean. We wanted to agree on what those key priorities would be, as Iffy's just talked about. We did films about microaggressions. We did cultural competence training. We created this group of really vibrant volunteers who knew that they were expected and hoped that they would speak truth to power. And the most important thing, I think, was that we showed as an organisation that we were really, really listening, and we wanted to hear those uncomfortable things that needed to be fixed. We changed our recruitment processes, and we very quickly saw things start to change. So you can see on this slide some of the things. So the representation at different levels improved very, very quickly. We started to see that more than 50% of our internal promotions were of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic staff. We started to see that representation gap start to narrow, and that's set out in the next slide, if we can move on to that one. So we still have a big programme of work to do, but if you look at this slide, you'll see that green, so we've got 46% Black, Asian, minority, ethnic staff in our organisation. And if we were to have equity at every band from band 7 upwards, we would all be at green. But what you'll see is that every year we are narrowing that underrepresentation gap. So what I would take away from this is that it's a big, big mountain to climb, but we can climb this mountain together if we really put our back into it and really, really work on these things. So I want people to come away with a sense of optimism that things can get better when you really put your mind to it. Next slide, please. What we realised is that this work, in some bits of the organisation really ran with it. Some managers really got it straight away, wanted to get involved. But we were aware that there were areas of the organisation where people weren't getting as involved as we would like. We, as with lots of organisations, have only a tiny equalities team, and we were trying to work out what was the best way of using that resource as well as we possibly could. So we set about the BAFO 5-step challenge. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved around inclusion, to overcome discomfort in talking about race. And so we decided to do it in a particular way. We invited every team to try the BAFO 5-step challenge. Teams that completed it and got involved would become BAFO accredited. They could use this email in their emails, in their recruitment, and we would celebrate them. And I'll show you some of the images of people being celebrated. But we also meant that we would be able to spot those areas of disengagement. Why would there be pockets of the organisation where people weren't getting involved in this programme? It would help us to target our resources in those areas. If I can move on to the next slide, please. So the 5 simple steps were that people had to have a 1-hour conversation, they would have regular check-ins, they have to do something that they can post on social media, they would have reference to what they do around inclusion in their personal development plans, and they would have a specific creative local goal. If you could move on to the next slide, please. And those people who've completed it get certificates from the chief executive, they get accredited, there's lots of celebration of their stories. but it also helps us to know the areas that need more focus. Next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to, so that has been a really successful way of improving our engagement around building a fairer Oxleas and around inclusion in the organisation, and it continues to go from strength to strength. But one additional thing I did want to talk to you about is around our shadow executive. So we are now on our 3rd year in Oxleas of a shadow executive, and the purpose of it is to improve the experience of minoritised staff in our organisation and amplify their voices, as well as to challenge group think in our organisation. So we have a shadow executive, which we're very, very proud of. Next slide, please. So we invite applications from any member of staff who feels that they can bring fresh thinking. We have many more applications than spaces, and we select members to ensure that the whole breadth, the fabulous diversity of Oxleas is represented in our shadow executive. So we have 12 members, and they are part of it for a 12-month period, and the chair is on a rotating basis. And they get to see every paper that goes to our formal executive meeting. Next slide, please. So what happens is that all of the papers go to the shadow executive. They get to meet together to reflect on the papers, and then they meet with IFE, Chief Executive, myself, and a member of the Executive Director team, and tell us what they think about the papers. And their input into that is then discussed at our formal executive meeting, and it really shapes what it is that we do. So they've had impact in relation to what we've done around sustainability, how we communicate to staff, what we do around our new strategy, and they bring such a fantastic different perspective, and they really help us to challenge groupthink. And anyone who meets with them reports that it's been a really uplifting and energising experience. We've won awards for equality and inclusion, but it's also been such a fantastic and vibrant two-way process where we as an organisation have really benefited, but they have found it really valuable too. Next slide, please. So, building a fairer Oxleas fits with our wider culture in Oxleas. So we really believe that listening as learning underpins all of our cultural work. We think it's key to the Oxleas difference that makes Oxleas a different sort of culture to many other organisations. Our Oxleas values are: we're kind, we're fair, we listen and we care. And those are embedded through all that we do, through our Building a Fairer Oxleas work, through our leadership programme, and through our shadow executive. And just to give you a sense of some of the differences that this can make, my last slide just highlights some of the benefits. Next slide, please. So it is starting to work. We're not complacent. There's much more that we want to do, but our staff survey results have shown us to be one of the top places to work in London and 5th in England. We've won awards for our shadow executive and our Building a Fairer Oxleas programme. Our representation of BME staff has increased substantially by over 30% even in the last year, and we have one of the most diverse boards in the UK. And we've been raising our profile through things like the Best Places to Work with Sunday Times and the HSJ Trust of the Year. But the most important thing, I think, is that there is a real sense of hope in the organisation, that when we apply our minds to things to do with inclusion and we keep going with it, we can start to see long-lasting changes. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Anything else from you, Ife, or was that the closing statement? Was that the last bit?
No, that was not the closing statement, so thank Rachel. She isn't feeling too well, but she was keen to.
Oh, wow. Well done. I could tell you, oh gosh, I could see your coughing there. Fantastic, really interesting presentation. Lots of questions and in the chat there. I'm just going to take a couple, forgive me, just to get things started here. A quick one from, I think it's John, who says he's interested in what deep listening is. What is deep listening beyond the normal, listening better? What is, describe deep listening for us, and then I'll move on to a different question.
Thanks. In my mind, deep listening is when you really properly create the space and the time to really hear what people are telling you and acting on it, making sure that you've understood it. And it's a lot more, I think, than just giving people the opportunity to speak, because when you really deeply listen to people, they come away feeling heard. And I think that's quite different to just being given the opportunity to have a voice.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that and I was thinking it's listening to understand, isn't it? Rather than getting ready to respond sometimes. And I'm all about being practical. I love these webinars, but I always think, what can we do with this? So let me ask you this. Everyone listening here, I love the 5-step challenge. I think it's fantastic. What advice would you give to anyone listening here if we wanted to go implement our own 5-step challenge back at our respective organisations? What's the approach? You know, what do you think we should keep in mind so that it's authentic to us, not just mirroring Oxleas, but how do we make it authentic to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think learn about what really gives energy in your organisation, because I think what we try and create here is a sense of positive movement rather than a sense of people having their kind of fingers being told you must do something. What we want to do is to have that sense of real opportunity and enthusiasm that can come when you, and I've been blown away by the positivity and the team dynamics, the improved team cohesion that comes when people are having these really good conversations. So I would think, unlock something. See if you can unlock a real positive spirit in your organisation. Effie, what do you think?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right there. I know it's fairly typical in the NHS to think, how do we share this and do it elsewhere? But your point, which I completely agree with, is about you've got to tune into your organisation. So I recall that when we first started those BAFO groups, people were challenging us and saying, well, how is this any different from what we've done previously? What are you going to do to people who don't pay any attention? And I recall one particular session where I simply said, well, people will find that Oxleas is not the right place for them to work, and they'll have to go elsewhere, And so we're on a journey. So we've built this. So people who are listening to this and who want to see that where they are need to think about what has happened in the organization, what's happening, and how can they tap into something that's positive that will enable them to get started.
I mean, if you were there driving this. You decided you were going to chair this better, fairer group, and that's wonderful. We'd love to see more of that. But what tips do you give to colleagues who are maybe facing a bit of challenge with leaders who are a bit reluctant to come to the table and talk about this? Because you've got lots of people, lots of Rachels in organizations who are trying to get this done, but they are being hindered by a reluctance by leaders. So any tips to engaging them?
This is about cultural change. If you want to change culture, you want to get as many people as possible, particularly the leaders. So although I chaired the group, members of the board, including the chair of the board, was behind it. And so we demonstrated as a leadership group that this is something that we all wanted to get behind. And that's one of the things that has really made that difference. Because people will see what you do, not so much what you say. And it is through our doing that people have come to appreciate that we are serious about this. And then we've given it a great deal of support, as Rachel has described. Okay, so keep pushing, keep talking about it, keep showing that you're not giving this up, and win people over, I'm hoping. Someone's asked, how did you enable people to have the time to get involved in the various activities that you cited in the presentation?
So we designed the shadow executive in a way that doesn't take up a huge amount of time. So people attend one meeting for 2 hours on a Thursday, and then the following Monday they take it in turns to attend the meeting with Iffy and myself to feedback the view. So it does take a bit of time, but it's a fantastic development opportunity. Nearly everybody who's been involved in it has gone on to be promoted. And they are such fantastic advocates, and the experience that they get from being involved has been second to none. So it takes a bit of time, but it has been designed in a way that was enabled to made that work, I think.
Okay, great. I've got a couple more questions from two perspectives around the shadow executive board, which I'm loving the sound of. I'm going to speak to my chief people officer about that. And the first is, how were you engaging the staff networks at Oxleas? Were they encouraged to get involved in the shadow executive, you know, or was it just open to everyone? And then I'm going to ask Mahmood to come in with his question because he's a fellow Ned, so I've got to give a room for my fellow Ned. Mahmood, did you want to come and ask your question? Is he coming off mute?
Sorry, yeah, having camera trouble to turn it on, so hopefully
there you go. Nice to see you, Mahmood. Over
Hi,
to you.
Sharon. Yeah, nice to see you too. And sorry, I was a bit late to join the session, so apologies, I didn't catch it all. But yeah, I was just very interested on the shadow executive, because it sounds very much like it is, as it says, shadowing the executive directors as opposed to the full board. And I know other organisations, and we're certainly looking at it at Mid Yorkshire, looking at a shadow board itself, which I don't think will be any different people to the kinds of people that you're looking at. But I'm just really interested in this kind of the role of the chair and the NEDs in this. And I sort of know what you say really about the chair was behind it, but if we can get a little bit under the skin of that around the difference between I'm happy it goes on passively as a passive chair versus I'm actively doing something positive to make a difference within the organisation to lead it. And because clearly there's a spectrum across our trusts on that in particular. So I'd just be really interested in the non-executive side and what active leadership might look like in terms of advice to other trusts.
Rachel, do you mind if I just clarify something? So the Building a Fairer Oxleas group involved me chairing the chair of the board, NED, etc., being members of that group, which is quite distinct from the shadow executive group, who look through all the papers that the executives look at before it goes to board committees. And so Rachel and I and the exec colleagues will meet with them to hear their feedback. And then at our exec meeting, we'll feed into the exec discussions the voice of the shadow executive before it then goes to board committees chaired by NEDs and then the board. So I thought it's quite important to make that clarification. And so the first question, which was about the networks, want to come in?
Yeah, so thank you. So we checked with the networks that they thought that having a shadow executive was a good idea. They were really supportive and they really helped us to drive up the applications and to raise its profile. So the networks have always been a big supporter of the shadow executive, and indeed many of our network members have been and continue to be shadow executive members. So that's been something we've really done in partnership. So we've been very grateful to the networks for the role that they've played. On your question, Mahmood, I don't as to whether or not we have a shadow board or a shadow executive, we did think about that quite carefully. And the reason we went for a shadow executive is that our sense is often by the time things get to board, they're quite baked, as in the thinking has been quite kind of polished. And we wanted the shadow executive to have an influence at an earlier stage. So the way our governance works is that before things go to our committees, before they go to our boards, they go to our executive. So that's the place where we chew around the issues perhaps a bit more before they go on their journey up to the board. So we felt it was important that if they were to have a voice, that we didn't want them to be having a voice at a time when things had just become already too kind of frozen in terms of the thinking perhaps. So that was the reason for doing it at that stage. We have a similar model that we're also doing now for service users, using a similar sort of model. But the NEDs have a lot of engagement with our shadow executives. So, for example, our shadow executive have a talk on how to do chairing by our chair, or, you know, we bring our NEDs in to help with their development and to do lots of exchanges of information. So there is lots of engagement, but the moment at which we feel that the shadow exec can have the most influence is as things are going through our executive level rather than later on in relation to the board. Does that answer your question?
I think he's nodding.
Yes, sorry, finding my mouse. I'm not very organised with that. Yes, it does. Thank you both.
Okay, we're gonna pause it there because I'm mindful of time and we've got an agenda. But Ife and Rachel, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. There are some questions still to pose to you, but we can capture those later on. So forgive us if you didn't get your question answered this time, but we will do it later on. So next up, we have Laura Smith from Leeds Community Healthcare NHS, and she's going to be talking about hyper-local recruitment. And the title alone tells me that we're in for another treat with this presentation. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you so much. What an intro and what a hard act to follow from Iffy and Rachel. So thank you for a really brilliant and inspiring first presentation. I've got loads of ideas to go back to my trust with already. I'm going to talk to you for hopefully just under 10 minutes about hyperlocal recruitment, something that we have started doing in Leeds at my NHS Trust since April 2022. So we are just over 18 months into it now as an approach. It has a very grand title, and in fact we were absolutely thrilled last week to win a National HR Excellence Award for the approach. That's hot off the press for us. But at its root, it's a very, very simple concept. Hyperlocal recruitment is about meeting people where they are in every sense of the word, to help them bring them into our talent pool for the vacancies that we have in our NHS Trust. So could I go to the next slide, please? We had a whole range of ambition that brought us to hyperlocal recruitment, and it started with some business needs that you can see in the second and third bullet point along on this slide. We needed our organisation to be more representative of the communities that we look after, so that we can provide the best possible care to those communities and make better decisions about the work that we do. And we also, as a trust of approximately 3,000 whole-time equivalents, had a real issue with the vacancies that we had, hard to recruit vacancies. So in a trust of about 3,000, we were consistently running with about 200 vacancies at any one time. And that's despite our service managers, our recruitment and resourcing teams really having the pedal to the metal, trying to get people through the door. We also have a range of related ambitions around the health and wellbeing strategy for Leeds that looks at improving the health of the poorest the fastest, around sustainability, wanting people to reduce travel with our net zero ambition in Leeds by 2045. And overall, we wanted to reduce barriers that stop people even considering joining the NHS workforce. So a lot of different things came together to bring us to hyperlocal recruitment. I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail shortly about what we did to enact hyperlocal recruitment, but I did want to flag up at this early stage some of the outcomes that we had. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So since the 1st of April 2022, we've appointed 180 local people specifically through this approach. We would generally recruit to around about 600 vacancies a year. So this is approaching a third of our vacancies now being recruited through hyperlocal, and we have aspirations to expand that a lot farther as we move into 24, 25 and beyond. We have had some success in diversifying our talent pool through using hyperlocal recruitment. So we can see that 30% of people appointed are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, and that compares to, in our workforce, a general representation stat of around about 11% being from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. Leeds as a city is 24.5% of people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. So at the moment in Leeds, we still have a really long way to go to be truly representative of the communities that we serve. But with this approach, we are really getting closer to making strides against that target. And not for today, but we have a number of approaches in our ED&I programme, somewhat similar to what Rachel and Iffy have described about the development of Black, Asian, minority ethnic colleagues through particular targeted cohort programmes to help draw people through that talent progression journey. 90% of those that have been recruited 12 months or more ago through this programme are still here, which is a really good result for us. We would usually expect to lose between 15 and 20% of people in the first year of employment. So the turnover rate is much, much lower at the moment among this cohort. And we're seeing people already begin to be promoted in the organisation, which has been fantastic. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do we do to actually hyperlocal recruit? I talked about going to people where they are. We looked at where we had hard to recruit posts or posts that tended not to attract people from their direct community. And we physically went to those places. We tried holding our own events. Those weren't too successful. We did personal footfall around the area, leafleting houses. We ended up engaging a private partner to leaflet more houses for us at a far greater and more efficient rate than we possibly could. We used Facebook groups. They've been our most effective form of attraction, and we're looking at how we more closely target local social media groups as a means of drawing people in. What we found is everybody uses their phone. Everybody finds it easy to forward information from their phone onto friends, colleagues, family members. That's been our single most effective hyperlocal recruitment activity. We just need to refine it a little more. We are also building on our relationships with third sector partners. So we've had 16% of our hyperlocal recruits were referred to us through some of the bigger organisations like the Prince's Trust, but also smaller, very community-based organisations. GIPSIL on this slide is a community organisation based in Gipton in Leeds, which is one of our high priority neighbourhoods with sort of higher indices of multiple deprivation. We've had some really terrific new apprentices come through from Gipton who we would never have reached without the support from third sector partners. We're now looking at our relationships with a number of additional community partners in different areas of Leeds to try and build on those relationships and draw people from different communities into the workforce more effectively. We've course engaged with careers events that were happening anyway, particularly those that were targeted at particular groups, particular areas, even going to some in some pretty unusual venues. We'd like to build on that, but primarily we are looking to refine our approach using our social media presence and connecting with those third sector partners who really understand how to reach people. When we got people through the door, either through a telephone call, a Teams meeting, or physically present in a room with us, we looked with those people at what the barriers were that meant that they hadn't heard about our roles or hadn't considered applying for a role in the NHS in the first place. And the thing is, in the NHS, it's too easy to put a job on NHS Jobs. NHS Jobs as a website has been around for nearly 20 years now. And even though it's been around for 20 years, you'll only usually stumble across an NHS Jobs advert if you are looking for it, or if you know somebody who works in the NHS or that particular organisation who's perhaps signposted you to it. And we realised that we'd lost the art of really thinking hard about where we need to draw our talent from. When we spoke to people, we found that there were some really specific barriers that had prevented people from coming to us through NHS Jobs. They didn't know about it. They didn't know anybody who worked in the NHS. Some people had trouble accessing technology, and our ability to give them a paper-based, simplified method of applying meant that they were able to show us their skills in a way that they couldn't have done through the website. For some people, it was physically accessing interviews that was problematic. So we work with community organisations to look at how we could pay expenses where that was appropriate, and even help people with fares just to come to the careers events, to even come and talk to us about those roles. So just helping people to come and talk to us was a really important part of this approach. Can I go to my next slide, please, which is also my final slide? I wanted to show you some real people. I could talk for hours about hyperlocal recruitment. I'm trying not to, because I'd rather answer any specific questions. But I did want you to see some of our real people who have been involved in hyperlocal recruitment in one way or another. So Safwan, who we've recruited in Morley, had never even heard of our roles and is now working 10 minutes away from his home on a clinical apprenticeship scheme that we have put in place in response to the skills of the hyperlocal recruits that we've achieved. We hope for people like Safwan who join us on a clinical apprenticeship scheme, we now have a lovely clear pathway through a range of apprenticeships all the way through to professional registered nurses or professional registrants from right across the disciplines. So we hope that with a lot of our hyperlocal recruits, what people are doing is joining an organisation that can see them on a career development pathway right through an NHS career and right up the pay band structure to wherever they would want to achieve. Aaron, our head of admin services, who's from a BME background himself, has been an absolutely fantastic ally in hyperlocal recruitment, and we went where the energy was very often in terms of hyperlocal recruitment to choose to go with our early adopters to prove the process. He's been fantastic in working with people to help reduce those barriers. The approach to recruiting administrators at LCH now is much more diverse than it ever was, and it means that their vacancies have shrunk to nearly zero. And then finally, Kirsty Jones to the right. That isn't actually Kirsty in the photograph. She managed to dodge our photographer for months, but we'll get her in the end. We took over a rehab ward in Wharfdale Hospital, which is in a market town called Otley in West Yorkshire. Otley isn't the easiest to get to. Most of our employees and our reach is inside Leeds, and Otley is some miles outside of Leeds. We leafleted the whole of Otley. Was over 10,000 leaflets, and they managed to increase the staffing levels on the ward by more than a third through their hyperlocal recruitment approach, including some brilliant diversity across a number of protected characteristics, and also including professional registrants. So it's erroneous to think that hyperlocal recruitment only works for entry-level roles. It absolutely works across a decent spectrum of professions and skills, reaching people who haven't necessarily worked in our sector before. I'm going to pause there. I'd be delighted to take any questions. As I say, this is a really simple, it seems a really simple process. Go to people where they are, meet people where they are, and work with them so that they can offer their skills to the communities that we serve as NHS trusts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura, for a really interesting and just a really practical presentation of what you did, and it just goes to show when you are intentional about reaching people, it can be done. I was just listening to what you were saying about things that people take for granted. Not everyone has access to digital tools, so there is digital poverty. People would love to work or go for an interview, but they're thinking of the fare. How am I going to get there? Just simple things that many people just don't think about. So the fact that you're being really flexible in your approach, I love. So thank you so much for sharing. We've got a few questions in the chat. Jeanette is asking, is hyperlocal recruitment appropriate for the hire of niche positions? So make a note of that one. Cavita's made reference to the use of the word flexible use several times, because that's usually one of the biggest factors faced by people. I'm curious about, because you mentioned community partners.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious about, what advice would you give to working with system partners, particularly in the civic society sector, who often have their feet on the ground. They know exactly who to reach and when to reach them. So really curious about how you engage with them. So a couple of questions there to get you going, Laura.
Thanks very much. I'll start with yours, if I may. We had some established relationships with some partners. The bigger partners were easier to engage with more directly. So the Prince's Trust, for example, has a long-standing relationship with the NHS and is always looking for trusts to partner with. So if somebody wanted to start somewhere very practical, the Prince's Trust is a good one to start with. But for other community partners, we've got a brilliant organisation in Leeds called Forum Central, which is a sort of hub organisation for hundreds of different third sector organisations in the city. And we also have a brilliant Department for Employment and Skills at Leeds City Council. So we started there with their expertise to say, these are the neighbourhoods that we would like to engage with. These are the kind of groups where we are underrepresented and would like to be better. Whose door do we need to go and knock on? So it's being humble, really, and asking the question, and then quite humbly going and knocking on those doors and saying, we don't know enough about these areas and how to attract this talent to our workforce. Can we possibly work together? And without exception, we found that community groups have been absolutely delighted to work with us. And it's a little bit shaming, really, that we've missed out on the opportunity for so many years to date to really get more deeply into communities with these experts who know exactly what we need to do. And it really isn't rocket science when they've explained it to us. We've just somehow never thought of doing, or not thought
exactly. That's why the phrase hard to reach is so annoying for many people, because like it's not hard to reach. Sorry. And what about the other question around, is it appropriate for niche recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on which niche it is. I probably wouldn't use hyper-local recruitment for, say, a really technical digital expert role. I'd probably engage with a social media partner in a different way to try and reach that very specific target market.
Okay.
But, like I said, we've been really thrilled at the people who've come forward, especially so in Oxleas as a case in point.
Yeah,
we had specialists come forward who you really weren't expecting. So I would say if you target a local area in your patch, don't be shy about putting all of the appropriate vacancies out there that those people could usefully reach, because there will be talent out there who you just haven't expected, maybe recently moved to the area or just hasn't ever thought about the NHS before. So cast that line. You do need to be specific about your vacancies, otherwise you lose the impact of the hyperlocal. But you cast your line, and we've had some really terrific results.
Final question on this segment, if that's okay. Lots of work gone into the recruitment, and rightly so, but what's the retention been like? I know you alluded to some of it, but can you say a bit more about what the retention figures are showing?
So the retention figures are showing that people are more likely to stay if they've been recruited through hyperlocal means than through any of our other means of recruitment. And we are seeking to track our hyperlocal alumni as they transition through the system. We're a relatively small NHS organisation in Leeds. We've got great big Leeds teaching hospitals with 23,000 staff just down the road. So we do always expect that some people will find their next career step in an NHS organisation that isn't ours. So 90% retention after 12 months is our running figure at the moment, and we're really pleased with that.
Brilliant. I'm going to pause it there. Again, if your questions in the chat, we didn't get to it, we will do at the end. But Laura, thank you so much for coming to share what's been going on at Leeds. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on now, sticking with recruitment, but from a slightly different perspective. We've got Tom Warner, Clinical Workforce Equalities Manager, NHS England Midlands, and Cavita Chapman, Managing Director, Inclusive Leadership and Talent, who are going to be sharing about some research they've been doing with internationally educated and recruited nurses and midwives. Buckle up, it's going to be another great presentation. Over to you, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, hello everyone. I'm Tom Warner. I'm Clinical Workforce Equalities Manager for NHS England and Midlands, and my role focuses specifically on equality, diversity and inclusion for the nursing and midwifery workforce. Cavita, do you just want to introduce yourself as well for colleagues?
Hello everybody, I'm Cavita Chapman. I'm a former NHS nurse and an international nurse by that as well. And it's been a delight working with Tom to really look behind the papers in terms of what do nurses really feel when we promise them something, do we deliver? So this is all about how do they feel when they arrive here, and how do we support them? So I've been delighted to be part of this. Thank you, Tom, and over to you for the first part.
Thank you, Cavita. Yeah, so we're going to talk you through our piece of work, which is called We Belong, which is a piece of work that Cavita and I have led on, really evaluating the pastoral care support for internationally educated nurses and midwives across the Midlands region, really by listening to lived experience voice to find out what's working well and what needs to improve. We know, fully well that providing a good and best possible experience to international recruits is vitally important, so that we retain staff, so that we attract new recruits, and to provide that excellent service of care for patients. who feel welcomed into their communities and their sense of belonging. What kind of work that's happened previously across the Midlands is really focused on how organisations are supporting internationally educated nurses and midwives through things like trusts applying for the Pastoral Care Award, which some people might be familiar with, and the development of a good practice pastoral care checklist. But the objective of this evaluation was really to kind of get behind that, to complement it with that lived experience voice, and to discover what's working well. Just important to note that this evaluation really gives a kind of a snapshot in time of internationally educated nurse and midwives experiences from the Midlands, and gives areas for focus to explore at a system and organisational level. It's very much aligned to some of the major strategies of the NHS, but particularly the NHS High Impact Action 5 in the NHS Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Improvement Plan. That's around a comprehensive induction, onboarding and development programme for internationally recruited staff. So can we go to the next slide, please? So just to talk a little bit about the Pastoral Care Award. So the NHS Pastoral Care Quality Award was launched by the National International Recruitment Programme, the Nursing International Recruitment Programme, in March 2022. And this scheme aims to support NHS trusts to provide high quality standardised pastoral care to internationally educated nurses and midwives. To achieve this award, trusts need to meet a set of standards for best practice pastoral care. And that's really been co-designed and developed with people like international recruitment leads, international nursing and midwifery associations, and trusts that achieve that award are reassessed every 3 years. So that's really around standardising the quality and delivery of pastoral care, and gives an opportunity for trusts to really have their work recognised, to demonstrate their commitment to supporting internationally educated nurses and midwives, kind of at every stage of the recruitment, but beyond that as well. And the principal areas of that Pastoral Care Award, I think, are around things like creating strong foundations, enabling new recruits to feel welcome, building belonging, and offering personal and professional growth. And you can see kind of the criteria that's on the kind of right-hand side of the slide here. And this evaluation process has really been designed around that criteria. For the awards in this year, in 2023, we had 30 of our Midlands trusts who applied for that, and 17 were successful, with potentially more to follow after being reviewed regionally by our NHSE international recruitment team. And we've said that applications were really strong, with really good evidence of compliance and examples of good practice. Could we go to the next slide, please? So just to kind of show you how this evaluation started out, is really asking the question regionally, myself working with colleagues working in the EDI space and the international recruitment team, asking the question like, how are we doing around that pastoral care offer? So we've got the National Pastoral Care Awards criteria that's been set out that I kind of just talked through, but really want to find out how that support's actually being received by internationally educated nurses and midwives, and going beyond that to look to continuously improve the offer. So we then set to find out those experience via qualitative focus groups and a regional survey, and the findings was then benchmarked against that National Pastoral Care Award criteria. That's then been analysed at length, and we've identified and reported against the gaps areas to be strengthened that are against 4 main themes, alongside what is also working well. So now in the kind of write-up engagement stage and promoting our results across the region and beyond at events such as this. Just go to the next slide, please. This just shows a timeline of evaluation and kind of how we did it. So in terms of the cohort of staff that this was aimed at, it was international recruits that had joined or had landed in the country in October 2020 onwards, and had lived in the UK for a minimum of 6 months. So that was those that were actually came in as part of the international recruitment programme. And Cavita and I very much co-designed, developed this with people like international nursing and midwifery associations and international nurses before launching the survey and focus groups in the summer this year. Then it's been that write-up and the collation of the data and analysis, and we're then sharing it now, as I mentioned previously. Go to the next slide, please. So this just shows a summary of the kind of demographic data that we had through from our regional survey that went out to internationally educated nurses and midwives who had been recruited after the 31st of October 2020. So you can see it's quite a good response rate across the region. We had 589 respondents from across our Midlands region. You can see in the middle of the map there, that's kind of our integrated care systems. We've got 11 of them in total in the Midlands. It's a really diverse region in terms of both ethnicity, but also demographics in the region. Some very rural locations like Lincolnshire, to inner cities like Birmingham. The nationalities that you can see there, very much representative of the largest groups that we have in the Midlands. So really good that they kind of matched that and was received by a widespread of nationalities of those internationally recruited nurses and midwives across the region. You see majority of our respondents were working at band 5. However, there was a large response from those that still didn't have a PIN number working below band 5. And this really came through some of our evaluation, what we'll describe in a little bit more detail in terms of frustrations from internationally educated nurses and midwives about being treated as nursing assistants, even though they've come from another country with a wealth of prior experience. I know that's been well documented kind of with outside of this evaluation in terms of that lack of recognition of prior experience as well. Next slide, please. So just to give some key findings here from the survey results that came out, and on quite a positive note, you can see that over 90% of our internationally educated nurses and midwives felt safe in their accommodation that they were provided with on arrival into the country, and had really positive interactions with colleagues upon supporting them to settle in. You can see that majority of our respondents also were greeted at the airport, and almost all of our providers were able to provide some support for onward professional development. And over 60% of new arrivals had opportunities to be joined with their family, which helped contribute to the speed of settling in. Looking really at our improvement areas as well, and something we really wanted to flag up and work with our colleagues in the Midlands on, is that 57% had not had a conversation about career development with someone from within the trust, and actually 64% of them were looking for a promotion to a higher band within their current trust. So actually, as part of the pastoral care awards criteria, it's very much has that section around career development and conversation. So that's definitely going to be an area of focus for us in the Midlands going forward. And also over 40% hadn't had support to understand local dialects and phrases. So thinking about things that we're really going to be recommending to our Midlands systems and international recruitment leads going forward is really thinking around how do talent management conversations get embedded, making sure that appraisals are robust, and that's starting, as soon as possible when international recruits are settling in, really to talk about their ambitions. Really think that things around clarity and communication are important, so before, during and after recruits arrive, so making sure they have things like briefing packs, check-ins, reflective practice to support that as well, alongside things like data and evidence, so regular audits. So this is a regional evaluation that's taken place really to kind of, I guess, get under the bonnet of how that pastoral care and support offer is being received. But we really think that this can be done at a local level, again, to support that continuous cycle of improvement and to make the pastoral care offer even better. So I'm just going to hand over to Cavita now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the qualitative information that came through from the focus group. So over to you, Cavita.
Thank you, Tom. So I think Tom mentioned something about when we think about expectations versus satisfaction, when there's a percentage of staff that may have calculated as a band 5, what would I earn in England? And then they come and for months and months and months, they're earning at a band 3. Some of the quotes we got were like, I just didn't realize the country would be so expensive and things wouldn't match up. And so not only in my first month do I have to read every policy, because I have to do all my mandatory training, do my OSCE and pass and settle in, and then find an estate agent who I know nothing about and navigate my way to accommodation. It's the highest peak of loss of my family in a different country versus stress in a new country. So at the point when people, at the point people are meant to be supported the most in this peak of stress, sometimes things get missed. And what we saw here in this research or this evaluation was a mixed bag. We saw some beautiful examples. And when we think about communication, the first big theme, we saw some beautiful examples of people naming people in the trust. And, you know, for instance, Claudia, and they named her throughout the entire journey because the trust had named people that people could touch in with before, during, after, for any particular reason. And so confidence of the international nurses were high because they could check things out. And if you've ever traveled, being in a country where it's very different, checking things out is very important. And so on the contrary, when we had people who had little information, didn't understand where they were going, didn't really understand how things worked, they were not really confident to check things out because of the trust, of the, will I look stupid if I check it out? Would people think I don't know anything? So communication and confidence went hand in hand. And you could see some organization like literally thought about every single step. And you could see those nurses saying, wow, we didn't realize people would be so kind. And so when communication and confidence was good, the people described it as they were very kind. They cared about me. I felt accepted. They really thought about me. So you could see that theme of how I was accepted, the culture and the compassion playing a part when the communication at the front is set up really well. Now, one of the biggest disjoint in this entire findings was, and this is for most of the organizations who told us that it seemed to be okay until I arrived on the ward, because the ward staff seemed to not know anything about me, didn't realize I had 10 years experience somewhere else. They sent a nursing assistant to do my whole induction because we can't find a manager. And then, so people, A, don't understand my skills, don't really know about me. So do they really want me here? So these nurses were making shortcuts in their brain waves around, well, if nobody's there to greet me and I'm just left, maybe they don't want me. And so, of course, that's not a perception of the ward staff. We're desperate for these nurses. However, how did we greet them is a major part. And we could see from the opposite of the ones who were greeted well, the way they were greeted well. So the way the ward round team know that they were coming and celebrated them being here, and they had a buddy. So we saw the opposites in some instances. And then one other major kind of point for development in this research was about the way people are experienced when behavior or skill or clinical competency isn't up to par, in our opinion, the receivers. And so people felt, and then one person said, somebody went and reported me for 20 minutes when they saw me doing a procedure wrong, and they could have helped me. So there's something about international nurses coming here and experiencing us, the receivers, as we would rather report than support. And you think that's a strange culture. Why would they report me and not support me? And they're right there. And so the way they're experiencing us, the receivers, is maybe they don't like us. That's why they're reporting us. And so when Tom and I are going to go back to the Midlands to support different aspects of the pathway around this, it is, how did we really plan to make them feel? And if we plan to make them feel supported rather than being reported, what's our behavior? And that will take time because, you know, I've been every hierarchy in the nursing discipline. So as a ward manager, I know how busy we can be and probably not have enough time to induct people. But how did we plan to make them feel, and what did we do about it? So kind of in conclusion, I think this evaluation hasn't been surprising because we know that we still have a way to go. One of the positives for us is that when we go back through the 41 organization in the Midlands, and they submit their pastoral care quality award there's some really good best practice for different items in the pathway. So Tom and I will be pulling out that really good practice per trust to say, well, if you want to know how to greet them at the airport, here's one trust that's doing it amazingly well. Here's another trust that set up a Facebook group 3 months before they arrived, and they knew everybody. And so we're going to just be handing back a lot of best practice to the Midlands, because everybody wants to do a good job here. You know, everybody from the OSCE people to the taxi drivers, the staff who volunteer to be taxi drivers, to the meds management people, to the ward team, everybody wants to do a good job. And so if we're not coordinated well, and we really need to learn from other people. So this is just a start. And hopefully if I come back in 2026 or 2025, the Midlands would be in a different curve, because we really want to see them learn from how people really feel, and get people to tell us that things are much better. So thank you from Tom and us today.
Cavita and Tom, thank you very much for yet another really interesting presentation. I'm loving hearing about what's been going on in different parts of the country with those trusts. I've got a few questions, just a couple, and then we're going to broaden out the Q&A, I think. There's a couple of people in the chat that were asking about utilising staff networks or the staff side, so that the nurses know exactly, you know, where they can go for that additional support, or actually know what their rights are and so on. Were those groups included in the welcome, shall we call it?
I would say it was a bit patchy, Sharon. So
okay.
We would have thought that every staff network would have a newsletter every month saying, we've got 30 nurses from Nigeria coming, and here's their bios, and here's their profile. Here's a celebration, Zoom party for them. Nothing. For other trusts, we saw that kind of communication with networks. But, you know, staff networks are a free resource that organization could really optimize to welcome people. So I think joining up the dots here could be better.
Yeah,
and I think just building on from that, kind of what was Cavita was saying, we wanted to find out where those trusts done that really well. So, you know, when people have come in, they've been welcomed by network members, that's made really clear and introduced right from the start. Those kind of areas of best practice we wanted to share wider, so we can see, you know, the areas where that's worked really well, so that others can build on and make that part and parcel of that offer. So yeah, thank you.
Ron, there was one more thing I forgot to say, which was crucial, was that we in England make an assumption in nursing that everybody else know that when Ward B is short staff, Ward A staff would move. These nurses didn't. And some of them said, I was crying in the toilet. I was so scared because they kept moving me to different wards and I wasn't prepared. So they didn't even orient me where things are in different wards. But it's just normal that everybody moves, but it wasn't normal for us. So I think when we think some things are obvious, it's not obvious for new recruits.
And I've seen that Mahmood's got his hand up. I'll come to him in a second. But for me as a Ned, I see the reports coming across the board all the time, which is great. But as a board, what is it you think we need to be looking for in terms of both the operational side and assurance to really be clear that the experience of international and educated nurses is going well and is having a positive impact on their well-being and their experience in the trust? Because we don't know that. So what is it you think we should be looking for in terms of seeking that assurance? Selfish question, I know, but I'm just, while I've got you.
I would say, Sharon, definitely, you know, the piece of work like what Cavita and I have done here has really been kind of like a regional snapshot of that experience to kind of like match up with like how has the offer actually been developed. So, like, you know, you can submit against the pastoral care awards criteria, but you need to actually speak to the nurses and midwives themselves. So I think at a local level, it's probably doing something very similar to this, but also, you know, speaking to people like the International Nursing Midwifery Associations, you know, they have that real close link to their members, you know. So we worked, for example, with people like the British Indian Nurses Association, Filipino Nurses Association, who they've really got their kind of, you know, that direct link into their members. Cavita and I went to a brilliant conference actually in Leicester from the British Indian Nurses Association, with a lot of new recruits that have been in the country quite recently that were actually very open in terms of talking about their experiences and finding out how well it was being received by them. So I think it's, connecting into those kind of groups as well, but definitely carrying out this kind of work at a local level in organisations to really unpick what's going on a bit more. Don't know if there's anything, Cavita, you wanted to add to that as well?
Well, from my personal experience, when I came to England, I'm saying nothing. I'm on a visa. So you're not really going to get me complaining about how things are. And I think where the stakes are high, people quickly work out who to trust, who not to trust, what they're going to say. And when we went to Bina, the lady from the NMC said September this year had on record the highest referrals. So who are those referrals to the NMC coming from? We hope that's not our international nurses. And so for me, it's when you ask about how does the board get that grounding, when I was a matron and service manager and GM and all that, nobody never said to me, here's your KPI for checking the experience of the international nurses. There's no heat map. There's no heat map around how are people having a good time here. So we're being targeted on everything else but staff experience.
Good shout. Thank you both. Mahmood, over to you. See, you've got your hand up patiently.
Thank you, sure. I was actually going to pick up on your question a little bit, actually, with a bit of an answer. So we at Mid Yorkshire, so we just won the HSJ Workforce Awards for our international recruitment. But this has been a bit of a journey. And actually, Asmina and Annabelle, I know NHS providers have done a case study on what we do at Mid Yorkshire. And to Tom and Cavita, if you want me to connect you to the team that have kind of made this amazing at our trust, I'm so proud of what we've done there. By all means, I'll drop my email in the chat and then get in touch with me and I'll connect you. But if I wind back 15 months ago, what we did is we actually got a couple of our international nurses to come in and as part of our board seminar. So not part of the board meeting where it's all transactional, everything's 5 minutes and you got to move on, but we actually spent an hour and a half just listening to staff stories in this space, and they were horrific. They were absolutely horrific. I mean, we had, and what I want to major on is this moment of truth piece for me, which is back then, the moment of truth was, as you guys will understand better than me, people that have come and left their families behind feeling really isolated. And in our particular case, some malicious CQC, anonymous whistleblowing against our international nurses, accusing them of things that they had not done. But can you imagine just what that must have felt like to have left your family behind, being isolated, and then people in your ward anonymously accusing you of making international phone calls and not being on duty when they were and all that kind of stuff. And it was all malicious. We didn't handle that well at all, but it was a wake-up call. And we've invested really heavily with staff time and money on our Stay and Thrive programme. And we're really lucky that we've got people that, people like Mai, who you may know, who really are front and centre in doing this nationally, and we've completely revamped how we do it, to the point that now, 9 months before our international nurses turn up, they've already got their named person, and that hand-holding has started at that point. When they arrive in the country, we're sorting out places to live and furniture. That's the level of hand-holding. There's a huge community now in our trust. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, we had our 1 year kind of anniversary of Stay and Thrive as a program within the trust, and that was just the most incredible, joyous occasion. And then a week later, we won the HSJ award for us as well. But that journey was massive, and I guess all I'd really want to say is that, at any trust, you can do that kind of a turnaround that quickly with this kind of stuff, and it's all down to that board will. And just doing that shock value. These stories exist, and you're absolutely right, Cavita. Many nurses were not keen to share their story in board because they were fearful. So some people pulled out on the day of wanting to actually share, even though it was a safe and open space. There was just a perception that if I cause trouble, this is bad for me. So I totally echo what you say. But there were a couple of nurses that were brave enough to tell their story. And I cannot begin to describe the contrast 15 months ago to seeing that same nurse a couple of weeks ago, in terms of just how happy, how joyous, and how much belonging they feel in the trust. We're actually going to reduce our international recruitment because we've done very well on filling our vacancies. And our CEO is now having an active conversation about, I think that's a mistake.
Okay.
Because actually the culture of the employee that we want to bring into the organisation, it's much more what we've seen from our international nurses than what we're going to fill locally, potentially. Yeah. So we're querying whether culturally it's the right thing to do to use the international nurse recruitment as a residual when you can't recruit. Probably not hyper locally from Laura's perspective, because we need to do far more of that, but from the UK, or do we get a better mix? Because actually they've brought so much to our trust in terms of our culture, that we don't really want to lose that. But I just thought I'd share that. But I don't know if the case study is available, but it'd be maybe a good thing for people to access and have a read of. And yeah, certainly Cavita and Tom, I'll connect you in to have a more detailed chat. Might be useful for your findings as well.
Thanks, Mahmood. We've just got a few minutes for some general questions for the entire panel who've joined us on screen. So I don't know if there's anything that anyone wants to share. I do have a question. I want to bring it right back to the title of the session, which is about tackling inequalities to build a healthy workforce. And I'm just keen to find out thoughts from people about how are you linking what you're doing back to staff well-being? How does it link back to, fostering a healthy workforce? That's just a general question to the panel there. I don't know if anybody wants to have a go at answering that one. Yes, Rachel. And both of you got your hands up, so Oxleas, over to you.
Go, Rachel.
I think I was just reflecting on the power of really hearing people's stories, and I think it came through in lots of the different examples that when you really, I think the stories, particularly in the NHS, I think stories move people more than anything, and they are really powerful with boards. And I think you were hearing kind of from Cavita, but often from Mahmood as well, about how it was really hearing that set that baseline. And for us, certainly, I think there was no way of getting away from it. When you heard the power of those stories, we all knew there was no way then that things could not change once we had captured those. And to me, that kind of runs through many of the stories that we've heard today. Iffy.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so one of the things that has always fascinated me, having worked in teams, a bit like Cavita was describing, right, is this thing about how do you get people to bring their whole self to work? You'll be amazed when you talk to people, how people say they segment, I come to work and I just do this, and people don't know this, that, or the other about me.
They segment themselves, don't they? Yeah.
Exactly. And I know there's been lots in the chat. This whole notion of psychological safety, feeling that you belong, feeling that people have got your back, makes a huge difference if we can drive that culturally, and it takes a lot of work. So there's no question in my mind. I mean, anyone who's read lots of stuff will know that diverse teams, if people feel safe psychologically, to go places, so we need to be able to harness all of that. So there's no question in my mind that if we get this right, I think I said something similar to this in the chat, that if we get it right, the NHS will be in a different place, where people feel safe to just talk about issues, including clinical care. I mean, that example you gave, Cavita, that people couldn't be bothered to say, hey, let's help you do this right. But they were only too happy to go and complain. I mean, what is that? And that still happens in the NHS. Rather than seek to support your colleagues to continuously improve, you either want to get one up on them, or and we just need to keep pushing to drive this out. So,
thanks, Ife. Amanda agrees with you. Psychological safety is key to all of this, she says. And I do have a question from before. Again, sorry, Oxleas, I'm coming to you. How did you use your learning to expand the work to other protected characteristics? So moving beyond, because you mentioned around George Floyd and BAME communities, have you used that to move into other aspects, maybe disability, for example, or another characteristic that needs attention?
Yes, so we do it right across the board. So we started with race because that was where we had the biggest kind of sense of raw emotion that really needed to be addressed. But we recognise that if you get it right for one group, you're going to get it right for everybody. This is a mindset. This is about being able to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand people having different experiences. So building a fairer Oxleas has race at its heart, but it applies to all protected characteristics. And we felt that that's given it real strength. And yeah, it's gone from strength to strength and applies right across the board.
Okay, great. Sarah Raj says, have any trust gathered intelligence on the potential impact of the new immigration laws on our staff in the way we did in the run-up to Brexit, so that we can try to address concerns, wellbeing issues? Cavita, you're nodding.
No, I don't have the answer, but I have the same question.
Yeah. Laura, anything from your side?
We're picking up on concerns already from particularly our international recruits about the new rules. We're actually just linking this week with one of our legal partners about the lines that we can give reassurance on, and the lines where there are more of these, unfortunately, where there just isn't the clarity yet about the full impact on people's individual circumstances. So we know that people are concerned about it. We are needing that legal advice to really help us be clear with people and hopefully reassure them as much as possible.
Great. And I imagine if people feel, we know that when people feel safe, they communicate. So I'm hoping that they will raise any concerns they may have in the forums that you've created in your respective trusts, so that you can start to address some of those. But it's a really important point, isn't it? Joe reminds everyone that the EDS 2022 outcome B is an annual measure on whether colleagues across the protected characteristics feel safe in their environment. So you may not be doing any one of these fantastic projects, but we do have an ongoing measure that trusts are duty bound to report to. So take a look at that, or speak to your respective colleagues about where your trust is on that particular thing. Any other questions for this panel before we start to round up? I guess, what's the one piece of advice, and I'd like to hear this one from everyone, that you would give to board members looking to progress these initiatives in their own trust? I know we touched upon the Oxleas one earlier, but the hyper local recruitment, or the more in-depth look into international recruited and educated nurses, what's the one piece of advice you would like to give to people listening today that they can take back to their respective boards to try and emulate in some way?
Shall I go?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to be cheeky if it's all right, and give two. One would be really clear what the challenges that you're looking to address and what success looks like, so that you know when you get there. And the second point is go to people who already know the answers and ask for their advice. We can't assume that we know how to do this, and indeed we probably haven't done it right before. So we need to find the right experts and the right communities to speak to.
Thank you. Cavita or Tom?
Yeah, I think for us, it's just, make sure that they are listening to that lived experience voice of internationally educated nurses and midwives to actually find out about how that pastoral care offer is received. We've got things like the pastoral care awards criteria, and surveys and audits, but is that really truly listening to that voice to really continuously improve that offer? I think that's what we've started to do with this piece of research in the Midlands, but very much looking to continue with that approach going forward. So yeah, that would be mine. Thank you.
Any final thoughts from Ife or Rachel on this? I know we spoke about it before, but if there's any other advice you'd like to share?
I'll go first, and then if you can have the last word. I would say, in your organisation, are you expecting the equalities team to fix your culture? Because if you are, it's never going to work, however brilliant your equalities team is. This has got to be, everyone has got to roll up their sleeves to get this and make this change.
Great comment there. Ife, how can you top that?
I have nothing to add because I agree completely. This is everyone's business. No question about it.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to pause it there because I'm conscious that diaries are full, and we did say we'll finish at 2 o'clock. It would be great if everyone could just put some comments in the chat function about how they found the presentations. I mean, personally, you know, I've heard that we've heard 3 great presentations today, practical ways of doing things. And I think the common themes for me are you need to be focused, you need to be intentional, and you need to never stop looking for answers, and you need to drive from the top. Those are the 4 things that I've found. And actually that's fine, isn't it? Focus, intentional, never stop looking, and drive from the top. There you go. Find is the key. But let's finalize this now. On the slide, on your screens now, you could see a slide with some upcoming events. Just get that QR code so you know what's coming up. I think the next webinar is on the 20th of February 2024. My goodness, can you believe it? 24. And that's how to challenge discrimination. That sounds like one we do not want to miss. So please take that and share that with colleagues as well. If we move on to the next slide, this is the bit that's important. We want to know what you think. Yeah, what did you think about today's session? Scan that QR code and access the evaluation and just share your thoughts, just so we can build on that and make sure that every time we deliver, we're delivering, you know, things that you want, and we're taking on board your feedback. So please find 5 minutes today and complete that. That would be really, really helpful. And if you need any further information, do just drop a line to the team, either in the chat function here or after the session. So please get that over to us. Any other comments from the team that you'd like me to take care? Here we go. If you want to find out more about Race 2.0 or the podcasts, or listen to some of their interviews with white allies, blogs, etc., it's all on the NHS providers website. They are fantastic. I've listened to quite a few of them myself. They're very techie here at NHSP, aren't they? It's all about scanning the QR code, which I love. Very, very 21st century. But yeah, and if you haven't got time to do that, just take a photo now or when the slides come through, and you can still scan it that way as well. Is that the last slide there, team? Have I captured it all? Yeah, that's it. It's been wonderful speaking. Please just, you know, give a round of applause to our fantastic speakers. If they are Okocha, Rachel Clare Evans, we've had Tom Warner, Cavita Chapman, and of course, Laura Smith. Brilliant presentations. Thank you for your time. And I know it's a bit early, but, you know, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. However you celebrate that, have a great time. And please take care and look after yourselves. See you soon. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.